Hello, everyone. We are Public Hangout. It's our first international hangout. I'm actually in Santiago, Chile right now, and I can't see myself, so just bear with me. We've got an amazing game changer this week. It's Yasmina Zaidman from the Acumen Fund. She's the Director of Communications and Strategic Partners. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. So kind of want to hit the ground running and talk about, you guys are really focused on this niche of patient capital. There's not a lot of people doing it, and I'm just curious of like, how do you see yourselves as a part of the bigger picture of impact investing?
Yeah, well, I think the field of impact investing has really been exploding, and it's become a sort of a big umbrella, which I think is exciting. There's a lot of different people involved in the space, and I think essentially just focused on how do we use investment tools and support for business models to have an impact on social issues. I would say where we really sit within that is our focus is on the poor, and we want to find and support really innovative early stage business models that we think can identify brand new ways of solving problems of poverty. So we're in an interesting space because we work with primarily philanthropic capital, donated capital, for people who are interested in seeing real social change through their philanthropic dollars. That developing new solutions for solving problems of poverty. So we're in that middle ground, and it's an exciting place to be as we see new opportunities to find and scale businesses that are now interacting with a lot of the other players in the impact investing space as they continue to grow and look for new sources of capital.
Two things. How big is Acumen Fund at this point?
So we've invested about $83 million in roughly 72 companies. We've opened offices in the regions where we invest. So we have offices in Nairobi, Kenya, in Accra, Ghana, in Karachi, Pakistan, and in Mumbai, in India. So both in terms of the size of our portfolio and the size of our global presence, we've grown significantly, and we've been around for 11 years now.
And the idea is this: you take this kind of donor capital, and it's a venture philanthropy in a way where you're not just giving it away; you're investing it smart. Where in the medium to long term, it gets paid back with some sort of interest or exit.
Exactly. And I think when we think about these investments, we really do want to be a bridge, but we also want to make sure that we're helping move companies towards really being ready for future investments. And so we have to kind of balance that as we think about how to invest. We really want to build scalable companies that are attractive to other investors in the impact investing space and ultimately commercial investors and banks. But our role is to really help find and support these businesses that we think have really breakthrough ideas at a stage when other investors really wouldn't break them typically.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I work in the industry is developed as microfinance, and you're in, all the ones that microfinance was in, 30 years ago, agricultural, education, energy, health, housing, water. This is kind of the future of impact investing, but we're just not there yet, where the commercial, the big money, who just it's not quite proven itself yet, and that's why it's so unique and interesting to me to kind of like what is it that you're learning in these sectors? What are the takeaways? Are there certain sectors that we just mentioned that are leading more than others, or how do you kind of see that growth?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's just a matter of time before people sort of get it, that there's all these huge opportunities. I definitely think we're learning that there are sectors where there's much more opportunity than maybe commercial investors have recognized, and those sectors will probably grow more quickly and attract commercial capital more quickly. But what we're seeing is that there's a lot of incredibly exciting investments across all of our portfolios that are having a huge social impact. I think of one company in particular called Husk Power Systems that's bringing off-grid electricity to rural Bihar, which is an incredibly poor part of India, and using a really innovative approach to taking rice husks, which is a waste material, and converting it into a source of electricity for rural communities in a way that's really affordable. I think for them, it is going to take time as they grow to achieve that kind of commercial viability and scale. But I think if Husk came around in 20 years, it would face exactly the same challenges as today, in the sense that it is going to need a different kind of investment. They've received everything from grants from the Shell Foundation to patient capital from us. They, in the very earliest days, got seed funding from business plan competitions, and they work with the government and actually have some subsidies involved. It's the nature of the business model that they really are focusing on places that have been totally underserved, very low-income people, in places in Bihar where even nonprofits aren't venturing. And so I don't think it's just about showing the world, hey, there's actually a ton of money to make here. I think there's always going to be a need for a spectrum of capital. And I would venture to say that's probably the same for microfinance, that there are some products and some markets that are mature, but I think if you're really trying to penetrate into new markets, I think that'll always be a challenge. It'll always be a question of what's the best capital to achieve those objectives. So that learning is important, but what we're really learning is that that spectrum is needed, and it'll always be needed, and if people know where they are in it and can collaborate across the bridge, that's really going to scale these companies up over time.
Definitely. I mean, that was my big takeaway from, I had the opportunity to meet you and Jacqueline at CGI, and both of you were just very adamant about this collaboration. And so what is it that, how do you define patient capital in this kind of collaborative environment that's kind of growing? What's happening, what's not happening?
I mean, I think for us, there is this really interesting space to be defined about philanthropy-backed investing. And again, I think there's a few organizations in this space, but I think we're still primarily looking at a landscape of philanthropic organizations and investors. And often, even philanthropic organizations, when they start to look at this space, jump immediately to, I'd like to invest, and I'd like to see double-digit returns. So I think patient capital is that space in the middle. How could you use philanthropy to drive the creation of businesses? How could you do investing in a way that's actually kind of in the space that we're in without expecting a lot of return or quick turnaround time? And recognizing that the investments that we're making and a lot of our peers are making to help businesses scale, so the technical assistance and management support, is also part of the equation. And it does affect the business model of an investment fund. So I think that patient capital is really stand in the place between philanthropy and investing with the objective of building those businesses that have a social impact. I think there's not enough of it. I think there could be a lot more of it. I think there's a lot of institutions that have a clear social mandate that can get in the space, and we're excited to be starting some of those conversations. I'd love to give a couple examples. One is we just launched a partnership with USAID. They're providing a first loss guarantee, basically give an incentive for local banks to provide loans to the companies in our portfolio with this first loss guarantee in place from USAID. Again, it's trying to open up new sources of capital with them taking on the risk, which seems really appropriate. And then the other is a partnership.
So they take on, so just to clarify,
yeah.
if the deal goes bad, they take off like 50% of the credit or something like that. They immediately pay you. It allows you to de-risk, basically.
Right, and it's not us. It's looking at our portfolio companies, but it allows those companies to now start to work with commercial banks. So they're kind of using the portfolio as sort of a vetting mechanism, and helps us work with our companies to source new working capital loans, for example.
And to make that happen, did you have to put your? I mean, how did you get the banks to agree to that? I mean, are you putting up your own assets as collateral, or you just?
It'll be a transaction between the banks and the entrepreneurs, and these are banks that often do look for significant collateral. But this first loss guarantee is going to mitigate that. So they'll have lower requirements for collateral, which will make it easier for an entrepreneur to actually get a loan. Because often the collateral requirements can be, 2 or 3 times the actual debt amount.
Right.
So it's really trying to kind of break some of that down. And another partnership that we recently launched is actually to work more closely with corporations in thinking about how we provide the kind of management support and kind of market access that a lot of these entrepreneurs are looking for. And so we launched a collaboration with CGI, partly why Jacqueline and I were there, And it's starting out with Dow Chemical Company and also Standard Chartered Bank, which has a really strong presence in the region of East and West Africa, where we're focusing initially. The idea is to figure out how can we really help these companies scale by providing both financial resources to help them deal with big technical assistance challenges, but also in-kind support from these companies who can help them think through building financial management systems or evaluating strategic market opportunities. And what's great is these companies, they're also really excited by the social enterprise space. They want to better understand how entrepreneurs are approaching these underserved markets and what they're learning kind of on the front lines.
Exactly. Why? I mean, it just kind of boggles my mind that I see, Forbes front page. I see like Fast Company. I see all these amazing press for the sector. Why? What is the special sauce that you think that Acumen has got in terms of the branding and? Yeah, I mean, is it? Do you see it that you've made it, or do you see there's a huge challenge and you haven't raised as much as you would like to? Where are you in terms of like your goals as an organization?
Yeah, well, I mean, our goal is to change the way the world tackles poverty, and that I think is starting to happen. So we feel like it's been amazing to see the recognition of this space and to see some of these examples coming out of success. And there's definitely a lot more work to be done to really make this idea mainstream, to see it embedded within business practices, investing practices, even philanthropic practices. I would say that in terms of special sauce, I mean, it's hard to deny that, Jacqueline herself, I think her story, the journey that she's been through as a social entrepreneur is really powerful. And if you look at that story, and she wrote a book called The Blue Sweater, I think what you see there speaks to something that's always been really important to us, which is to recognize the risks and the potential for failure that's really a part of trying to do something different and something new. And so her story has a lot of that in it, of where there were stumbles, where there were hard lessons. And I think that same ethos has kind of permeated our work and how we try to communicate, which is this is hard work. We don't have all the answers. And as wonderful as it would be if someone could say, we found the right way and everyone just needs to follow us, the reality is that it's just about having the willingness to take risks and experiment. We like to put our bets on these entrepreneurs who we see as being among the most courageous people, and to encourage others to do the same, knowing that it will mean that there are risks, that there are failures, that there are bumps in the road. And so we try to communicate about that as well.
Maybe it'd be
Brian,
interesting.
I'm hearing a bit of background noise. I don't know if it's from your side or someone who's joined the call, but just want to flag it.
Okay. Hopefully it'll settle in a second. It could be my side. It's very possible.
Are you in a cafe or a restaurant at the moment?
No, I am in a lobby. So my room's internet is just not working. So I've been walking around with my laptop, and bear with me.
Are you trying to suggest that operating from a sort of developing country has challenges?
Actually, yes, it does. It is challenging in many ways, including Google Hangouts. But anyways, maybe interesting to talk about, your big, maybe a key takeaways and lessons learned from something that you've done on a project that may not have been, had all the right perfect storm of timing and team and idea, but didn't really work out, and then maybe another success where this is kind of like, this is my flagship that I present in meetings when I'm raising, I've got the big donor in the room.
All right. Well, I can share one story of a company that I personally worked with that definitely offered some lessons and some challenges on a lot of different levels, and won't go into necessarily all the gory details, but
Sure.
One of our earliest investments in water was in a company that provided household treatment to remove fluoride from groundwater, which we all think of fluoride as something that goes in your toothpaste and in some cases goes into your drinking water to prevent cavities, but in high levels it's actually really toxic and dangerous, and there's places in India and parts of Africa that are affected by toxic levels of fluoride. So this company had developed a technology that was approved by UNICEF, and they were distributing these household filters that had fluoride removal technology inside. So when we met them, we thought it was a cool idea. They were in the process of building a distribution network, basically hiring salespeople, teaching them how to market it. They had a really cool marketing strategy where they went and made performances in rural villages to help people understand the negative impacts of drinking water with fluoride, because there was a lot of behavior change involved. And we knew that it would be a time for them, but they seemed to have the right approach. They were both manufacturing and distributing. And I think that, it was such an early investment for us. And in water, I think we really underestimated how difficult it was to do this kind of behavior change. But I think what they realized before we did was that distributing directly to consumers was going to be a losing battle for them, that they didn't want to invest the resources in hiring their teams and doing all the marketing. And so they switched to a strategy that they had had before, which was just to sell these filters through regional government, through district governments. And we weren't really comfortable with the approach because we understood that that whole process was not very transparent. And there was really a high risk. A lot of the filters being sold through that market were not really effective. And there was just a mismatch in terms of what we'd agreed to. So we kind of had to walk away, but we walked away with a lot of lessons about the need for alignment with the entrepreneur, the challenges around marketing and distribution, and then just huge challenges around behavior change. People were collecting water every day. It was sweet. It was water from an improved source. And to get them to use a filter that they had to maintain, it was just a huge leap. And other companies we've worked with that have to do that kind of behavior change typically invest tons of money over many, many years to achieve it. So lesson learned, but it was our early days.
And what about the big flagship?
The big flagship success. I think we have quite a few companies now that we see are really starting to scale up and achieve significant impact. One, I think, great example is a company also in India that is focusing on emergency care. We met them when they had just started to build out a fleet in Mumbai, providing ambulances. Basically, to anyone who called, they have a sort of single number that you call, which is 1298. And they had 9 ambulances when we met them, and we helped them scale up to build that fleet in Mumbai and try to prove out the business model. And what they were able to do was show that they could, using a private model, meet the need for emergency care in a way that was financially self-sustaining and really high quality. And so they began to participate in some of these contracting processes around India to provide better emergency care. They've now scaled to, I think, over 800 ambulances across India in states, kind of from north to south. And in some ways, have really changed people's whole idea about how emergency care can be provided in the developing world. And so we see it as a success on so many levels, just the number of people they've served, the commercial success of the venture. They are, looking at new investors, but they've really been a game changer. They've challenged a lot of assumptions about emergency care.
What was the name of that again?
The company's called Zakitsa Healthcare Limited.
Okay. Really interesting.
And they're on their way to becoming the largest ambulance company in Asia. And again, I think where a lot of people just said it's not really possible to do this, they kind of showed that it was.
Wow. And just to kind of get some more context on your portfolio, is it half debt, half equity? I know you have debt guarantees, direct equity, quasi, and royalties. But can you share the breakdown?
Yeah, I would say that it's probably around 60 or 70% equity right now.
Okay.
And the equity investments that we're in are anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 years old. And so I think one of the things we're also thinking a lot about is exits, and when we'll start to see companies maturing to the point where it makes sense to exit. We're helping them graduate to new sources of capital, but also continuing to really be a champion in some way for their focus on poverty and that willingness to kind of take the higher and harder road.
And what's the stage of the company? Are they loss-making kind of startup, or are they kind of a little bit more concept proven? They've reached break-even. What's the level that you guys come in at normally?
Well, it's a great question. It's something we've actually put a lot of thought into recently to really analyze where our capital is best used and how it fits into this sort of broader spectrum. So we recently did an analysis with the Monitor Group. They have an inclusive markets division there. The report is called From Blueprint to Scale, and it's available on our website, www.acumenfund.org. And I do recommend people who are interested in this question of the different types and stages of capital to take a look at it, because it really lays out these different stages. In terms of our own portfolio, we did this pretty close analysis and found that there's 4 stages. The very earliest stage, which is again sort of the seed stage, the idea or the concept stage, where we think kind of friends and family, business plan competitions, maybe seed grants are best suited. The next 2 stages, as companies are trying to prove the business model, kind of demonstrate how it works at a bit of a larger scale, is a great place for patient capital, and often capital that does have clear focus on innovation and social impact. And then as they graduate, they can source other sources of capital that are maybe for scaling up. But what was interesting is that what we learned as we looked at the broader impact investing space is that most of the funds are really gravitating to and have a preference for companies that are proven to be economically viable and are ready for scale. And so there's a lot of capital coming in, and it's great to see, but our question is, how do we really build that pipeline? So our sweet spot is definitely in those 2 stages we call validate and prepare. There's some evidence that there's a business model there, and then really preparing for the next stage of growth by getting the systems in place, building the team, and testing that business model out in maybe a few different settings.
You know, when we talk about, thank you for that. These great answers. If I'm just trying to kind of move the conversation forward. When you talk about collaboration, a lot of times when I'm doing a deal, it makes me feel better if like Acumen Fund is also working with this company. How have you seen that kind of create the snowball effect for some of these companies who are trying to scale and reach those higher stages?
Yeah, I mean, I guess. Yeah, our hope would be that we've definitely had opportunities to co-invest, and frankly, there's other investors that we feel the same way about, that when they show up, we feel like it's a great vote of confidence. We've also tried to be really helpful in taking companies out and sort of being a resource to them as they're looking for things. We continue to participate often in rounds of financing to sort of, again, continue to be at the table. That's certainly something that we love to see. I guess the counterpoint to that is that if there's a lot of other investors really interested and we feel like our capital isn't as necessary, or the entrepreneur sort of trying to compete for better terms, we're also okay with walking away from a deal, because at the end of the day we have to raise this money from donors, and our promise to them is to really focus on those deals that don't have a lot of other sources of capital. So our average investment is about $1 million, and we're happy to do smaller investments or bigger ones, but ideally if it's a company looking for 3 or 4 million, we'd rather pool that and do it with other investors. But for the most part, we want to be an investor that comes in when there aren't a lot of other sources.
Who do you see as like kind of, I mean, are there a lot of other patient capital investors? I mean, the only people, I can't really think of many others other than domestic.
Well, I know we've co-invested with Root Capital several times with some of our ag investments. And I know there's a lot of groups in the space that we look at as peers. Grey Ghost Ventures, Amidiar. There's just folks who, I think are share a certain sort of value.
That's fair. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's fair. So I know we're just kind of wrapping up, but I would love to have you speak to kind of the young rose-colored glasses person who wants to get into the space or wants to find an opportunity that maybe you don't have the time to focus on, but you see this as a great place to spend a lot of your time on. So I'll let you just kind of say whatever you want to say on that front.
Well, I think there's so much to say about it, and we are continually amazed by the appetite of young people and some very accomplished young professionals and emerging entrepreneurs. But the level of interest, particularly among millennials, is incredibly high, and I think it's because a lot of the traditional boundaries and trade-offs that people took for granted are just not really considered to be an issue for this group. That, you know, making a difference and taking on tough challenges and having a successful career, all those things can sit together. So I think it's a really exciting time, and we've tried to keep up, I think, with that level of interest. You know, we try to be really communicative through our social media, through our website, and getting stuff out there. But what we've learned is that these groups and these people have a lot to say to each other. So there's a chapter network that's formed around Acumen Fund called Plus Acumen. And there's 19 chapters now around the globe and around the U.S. of people who really are exploring the space. And I just feel Acumen Fund can be a resource or a platform to come together with other like-minded folks. So they're interested in leadership training, they're interested in spreading the word about our model, just getting people in a room, learning more about the issues. So they do salons, fundraisers. But that's, I think, a really great opening for people who want to kind of get to know our space. There's also these great networks, the GIN, Andy, the Aspen Network for Development Entrepreneurs, resources like Net Impact, that I just feel like people who want to be in this space can just come right in and immediately find out who's doing what. There's not a huge barrier to entry. You don't have to get a PhD. You can get up to speed very quickly on the latest deals, the latest dialogue. And certainly when we think about talent, you know, we've invested in a Global Fellows Program and a Regional Fellows Program, first in East Africa and now in Pakistan. And so we're really hungry to find pipeline for that talent. And I think that, you know, people have an opportunity to kind of step into the space and to become a known quantity by writing about it, talking about it, showing up, and we notice those people. So I encourage folks to jump in with both feet.
Awesome. Do you have any like observations on the kind of seeing what you've seen from Ashoka to Acumen to all these different conferences, key assumptions or problems about the space that kind of bother you, that you think that somebody should be working on or somebody should be running at full speed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest issue right now is people talk about, you know, what is impact investing and what is the impact in impact investing. I just think it's really important to stay focused on what it is we're trying to use these tools to achieve. I don't think this should be seen as a sort of feel-good alternative to investment banking. This, to me, is a field that requires its own kind of understanding of what is required to build enterprises that can really meet the needs of the poor. And so I think to go in, like you said, there's sort of a rose-colored glasses effect, but to go in with that openness to the hardships, the challenges, the stumbling blocks, and where people, I think, right now are saying, you know, this is going to be a proven standard when you see a lot of returns. If we had applied that standard to other social issues, I think we would have fallen far short. And so it's more like, what can we learn about where returns can be found and where they cannot, and what are the roles of government, civil society, philanthropy, but not to get too gung-ho that this is just another great investment product that feels good, because I think it's much more complicated than that.
Right. It's almost like, I don't know, I've been thinking about this lately, but you know, you get a plate of dinner and then you're full and there's still like, you know, a quarter of the plate left. You could eat the rest of the quarter, meaning you could go for that extra 200 basis points or try and like continue on to reach more and kind of be more profitable or kind of short-term thinking, but you have to kind of balance that for the long term. I don't know if you've kind of been thinking about that. There's a lot of short-termism that I'm noticing just in the investing industry in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's why you'll see in our language just so much about, I mean, the word patience was not an accident.
Exactly.
And our former CIO, Brian Trelstad, who is really, I think, a tremendous thought leader in this space, came up with the phrase that we provide patient capital to impatient people. I think that sense of urgency is so important, but the people who I think have the greatest impact do take a long-term view and are comfortable with the kind of risks and failures along the way that are involved. I'll also take the chance to plug something that we put together called 10 Things We've Learned About Tackling Global Poverty that summarizes some of these insights, and it really does emphasize the need for patience, the willingness to confront failure, and to really challenge those assumptions about the role of markets and all of this. So hopefully that'll be a resource, and we have a lot on our website. So I actually have to run, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks for plugging at Acumen Fund at, is it
at acumenfund.org.
Yeah, acumenfund.org. And then also at Y Zaidman. Is that?
At Yasmina JZ.
Okay, I have it wrong. I'm talking about your email. Thank you again for everything, and look forward to staying close. And congratulations on the great success and work.
Thank you so much. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.